myself for the purpose of asking questions. Dr. Looney, I think almost everyone in this room agrees that borrowers should have access to affordable repayment options when they fall on hard times. But what the administration has put forth would turn a safety net for borrowers into a financial distress, into an unsustainable drain on taxpayer support. What recommendations do you have for Congress that comes to designing an effective income-driven repayment plan to protect students from unmanageable payment burdens, while at the same time protecting taxpayers from excessive subsidy costs?
Thank you, thank you, Chairman Owens. So I think that most of the problems that borrowers face are entirely predictable based on the institutions and programs they attend. So a lot of the problems that borrowers face with repayment, default, struggling with debts that are too high arise because they enroll in a program where the tuition is too high, or where students systematically leave those institutions without a degree or with a degree that doesn't lead to a good job. Mm-hmm. So I think in order to have a coherent income-based repayment system or a repayment system in which students are expected to repay their loans, you have to have a front end that has some underwriting or accountability for the institutions that ensures that that taxpayer money flows to those institutions that provide a good quality degree. And likewise, I think you need to have policies that put downward pressure on tuition and borrowing, things like restoring limits on graduate debt that used to exist that ensured that borrowers didn't take on debt that was too high relative to the programs that they enrolled in.
Thank you. Dr. Salerno, in your testimony, you proposed a solution that would allow institutions the flexibility to control borrowing in return to having schools co-sign their students' loan. Can you describe how your proposal would benefit students, taxpayers, and institutions?
Chairperson Wilson, thanks for the question. Yes, students benefit from risk sharing because institutions that are held financially liable for their students' success will put more effort into getting those students through the system faster and more cheaply. They will be economically incentivized to get graduates done in the shortest amount of time, and they will be incentivized to help those graduates find good-paying repayment afterwards, or good-paying jobs afterwards, because if they don't, they will be held financially liable. Taxpayers benefit because, again, part of the risk of loss gets covered by an entity that does not have to be skip traced and compelled to repay. These institutions have financial resources and have different solutions available to them to help recover losses on defaults. That alleviates the taxpayer investment, which is as important as protecting students in this case. And finally, institutions, while being subject to more accountability, benefit from having greater flexible autonomy. And by that, I mean they have greater control over how they conduct their business, and by giving them greater control, more flexibility to operate on a day-to-day basis, they benefit as well.
Thank you. You also indicated in your testimony that accountability is more than just sanctioning and should include financial rewards for institutions that keeps costs low and to serve at-risk students successfully. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. I think, again, any system of accountability should not be built just on sticks. It needs to be built on carrots and sticks. And so if we're going to ask more of institutions, we should give more to the institutions who exceed expectations and do well. One of the big challenges that we know with enrolling low-income and at-risk students, for example, is that while Pell Grants level the funding playing field, we know that these students need more resources than the typical borrower, the typical student who enrolls. It's harder for them to complete. They need more institutional resources to succeed. By giving institutions who perform well more of those resources up front, it only better positions them to continue to provide additional resources for those students.
Thank you. I yield back my time. I now recognize Ranking Member Jayapal for the purpose of questioning the witness.